It's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. There's some great big C there for you. Welcome to another video, and I did that just to have a little bit of fun. Is 2023 going to be the end of the world? That's what we're going to talk about today. No, I don't think it's going to be the end of the world, but it's going to be a little bit of an update on the seals that I talked about in 2021, and just kind of where I think we are in the Lord's timeline. We've got economic issues, we've got threat of global war, we've got all these things. We're going to cover some of these things. But the point is that our hope is not in this life. Our hope is not in this world. Our hope is not in our countries, in our government, in the next election, in our political leaders. Our hope is in the Lord. Our hope is in His plan, that He knows exactly what is going on. He sees the end from the beginning, and His goal is to save humanity so that all would come to repentance. And sometimes that means going through some pretty dark times. But this life is not the end. We all know that. And so whatever you might be going through, whether it be health issues, financial issues, we pray for you. I'm right there along with you. I look at the world and I grieve for so many people and the things that they go through, people in Ukraine and in different places, different countries, that their currency is completely worthless, that, and people in Africa, millions of people are starving, and there are things all over the world that are happening. People's losing their businesses and going bankrupt and all these types of things. And I grieve for, people around the world, and I'm blessed to be able to talk about these things, with in the country that I live in, and the things that I have, and I thank the Lord for that. But I also know that so many people are struggling, and I pray for them. But we all know that our time here is short. Our King is coming, and that is where our hope is. And I pray for strength for those who are going through different things. I pray that you would run the race until He comes. I pray, for you, that you would, continue that. And so we're going to talk about these things. Give you your daily dose of doom and gloom. And but again, as we go through these things, we know that the Lord is going to allow things to fall apart. All human agendas, all human plans, and that His day is coming to prepare the world for His return. And so, but we're hard-headed, we're stuck up, we're egotistical, we think we're, the most evolved humanity has ever been, when we're probably the most devolved. It's been in a long time. And so we have this, global view, and he's going to show us that, look, I've left you guys in charge. This is the mess that you've created, and He's going to humble us. And so, we're just kind of have to endure some of these things until He comes. But we're going to talk about how close that might be, and always looking up for His return. So let's get into this. This is going to be a little bit of a lengthy discussion. So grab your tea, grab your coffee, grab some snacks. Take a bathroom break, because, as you know, with most of my videos, we're going to get into a study here. So we'll take a look at Leviticus 25, verses 1 to 7, and that talks about the Shemitah years. But in the verses following, we're just going to click over that. Sorry again, I only have limited resources here. So here in verse 8 it says, "And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be to you 49 years. Then you shall cause the trumpet of the Jubilee To sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the day of atonement, you shall make the trumpet to sound throughout all of your land. And you shall consecrate the 50th year, and proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows out of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your unattended vine, for it is the jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. And so what the Lord is talking about here is that there's going to be 7 years. And in the verses 1 to 7 it talks about the Shemitah year. So you plant year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6. Then you rest. Then you have a 7th year of rest, where you don't plant anything in the land. Then you start again, year 1, year 2, and you do this for 7 cycles. And that comes to 49 years. But in the 50th year, you don't plant either. And the Lord says in Leviticus 25 that in the 48th year, he's going to give enough of a bumper crop so that you don't have to plant on the 49th year, the Shemitah year of rest, and the 50th year, the year of Jubilee. And it'll get you into the 51st year so that you can harvest a new crop and have food until that crop comes to fruition. And then you continue with the cycle all over again. And so one of the things that, depending on whether you're talking to Christians or you're talking to Jews, there's this talking about the Shemitah year, talking about the Jubilee. And so I just want to show you that there, this section, but it's about that when some say, oh, we the Shemitah year, the 49th year, Shemitah year, is also the year of Jubilee, and they combine the two, or that they say that that we're now in a new cycle of 7. So instead of thinking that's the 50th year, maybe they think it's the 40. What would that be? 41st year to, 42nd year into the 43rd year, and then continuing the new 7. And so what I think is that we are right now, since Rosh Hashanah of a few weeks ago, 2022 to Rosh Hashanah 2023, is the 50th year of Jubilee. And it's this transition period between one cycle of 7 and the next cycle of 7. And so we'll kind of get into this, but I want to give you the basis of what we're looking at here. So if we go back 50 years from 2023 to 1973, we see that we have the Yom Kippur War. We also see some major economic crises that also happened around that time. My hypothesis is that come Yom Kippur 2023, that will be the covenant with many as the end of the Gog-Magog War, the next major war with Israel, and the commandments of the last cycle of 7 years before Jesus returns. As I have said in previous videos, I believe that the Gog-Magog War is seal 6 of Revelation 6. Because if you look at Revelation 6, verses 12 to 17, and you can pause this and compare it with Ezekiel 38, 18 to 23, all of these red highlighted portions are similarities between the two passages. It talks about the wrath of God, talks about great earthquake, talks about Israel. One is the fig tree. It talks about Israel. One is that God will shake the mountains and throw them down, and the other one is that all the world will hide in the mountains as the rocks are falling down on them. And so there's all these similarities. And so that's why I think that seal 6 is the Gog-Magog War. And so if we look at it and say, okay, if next year, and I'm going to build this case, but this is what I see, is that next feast holidays of 2023, God will save Israel from its enemies, and there will be a max exodus at the end of the Jubilee year from different nations, and possibly even from the wars that are happening, that are going to happen, as we're seeing in Ukraine and Russia, that as that war escalates, more and more Jewish people are coming from Israel, or to Israel, from those nations, and they're seeing an influx in the immigration. And so, are we going to see that over this next year as the Jewish people return to the Promised Land? Also, our inheritance as Christians is heaven, the place that Jesus is preparing for us. And so during this year of Jubilee, is our, the return to our home, the return to the giving of our inheritance, and the place that has been promised to us. And so here we look at Ezekiel 37 verses 21, about just God calling the Jewish people from the nations and bringing them back into their own land. And so when we look in and we see that it says here that all shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land and to all its inhabitants. It shall be Jubilee for you, and each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. And so that's what we're talking about, is this the year that for both Christians and Jewish people we return to the land that has been promised to us by the Lord. For us, it's the place in heaven. For the Jewish people, it's the Promised Land. So why is this important? Because if I'm correct, that means that seals 1 through 6 will break in 2023 before the next feast holidays. Let's assume that 2023 is the year of Jubilee. Let's look back at history based on the Bible. God's calendar, let's say just the 1973 Jubilee year to 2023 being the Jubilee year. Jubilee year would run from Rosh Hashanah 1974, Rosh Hashanah 1973 to Rosh Hashanah 1974 as 1 year. Similarly, the 2023 Jubilee year would run from Rosh Hashanah 2022, which is just passed, to Rosh Hashanah 2023. And so we need to keep these years separated. So as I've already said, we see the Yom Kippur, which was already in the new 1973 Rosh Hashanah year, because it was in October of 1973. Yom Kippur comes after Rosh Hashanah. But we also have the 1973-1974 financial crash. 7 Shemitah years later would be 1980 to 81, where we had record high inflation and massive high interest rates. 7 years later, 1987 to 1988, in October of 1987, already in the 87th, 88th year, we have Black Monday, where U.S. stocks fell 20% in one day. In 1994 to 1995, you had the bond market crash, and emerging markets had a financial crash, where the Mexican peso crashed, causing a global financial crisis. 2021 to 2022, you had September 11th, and you had the dot-com bubble crash. 2008, 2009, you had a global Great Recession. 2015 to 2016, you had the Europe debt sovereign crisis, and then 2022 to 2023, we're going to have all of them combined. Of course, you can look back and you can see dates of different financial issues, in 1982 or whatever it is, like an in and off year. I'm not saying that everything that has happened every 7 years is the only things that have happened. What I'm saying is that I think there's a pattern in these 7 years, and I could be wrong. I could be pulling something totally out of left field here and be totally wrong. But what I was looking at is that all of these things, I believe, are going to happen. I believe they're going to be part of the fall of the global economic situation in 2022 and 23. We're already seeing we have record high inflation and massive and rapidly rising interest rates. I definitely think that we could see the U.S. stock market fall 20% in one day with the volatility that's happened, where it goes up 1,000 points and then down 1,000 points. The other day, it went from down 1,000 points to up 800, like 1,800 point swing in one day. Well, what if that was like, the reverse? You know what I mean? Like, I totally see that it could fall dramatically in one day. We're looking at pressure on the bond market and crashing, and emerging markets and developing countries seeing huge issues with the rising U.S. dollar. We're going to get into that. So we see the tech bubble bursting. We see the housing bubble in housing purchase, issues that are having in the housing market. We've seen Europe and its debt sovereign crisis. Like, so I just think that all of these things combined. And so here's what's happening at 15. We already saw a preview where all of these things were happening in 2015. And if you look, okay, so we have oil crisis. We have central banks creating global financial instability. We're seeing that in the UK. Global economic anemia, right? Our global economy anemic. We see that all the world that they're talking about stagflation, overvalued stock market, currency crisis. That right here, the U.S. dollar is on fire, gaining around 20% over the last 12 months. Geopolitical tensions contributing to economic crisis. That article covers all of these, and so God has been warning that these things are converging. They're going to come together. They're going to cause all these problems. We're going to see all these things come together that on a weak global economic system, it's going to overwhelm it and it's going to collapse it. And this right now, this is a problem if the U.S. dollar buries other global currencies or loses control of its own. Right now, the U.S. dollar is very strong compared to the other currencies in the world. But that causes problems for the rest of the world. And so here we see, let's just see here. Right, the UN warns of a recession links to imprudent monetary policy. This is October 3rd, 2022. A United Nations, so that's what we're now on the October 19th, 2022. So this is only a few weeks old. A United Nations agency warned on Monday of the risk of monetary policy-induced global recessions that would have especially serious consequences for developing countries and called for a new strategy. Excessive monetary tightening could usher in a period of stagnation and economic instability for some countries, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development said in a statement released alongside its annual report. Any belief that the central banks will be able to bring down prices by relying on higher interest rates without generating a recession is, the report suggests, an imprudent gamble, it said. The report said that higher interest rates, including hikes by the U.S. Federal Reserve, would have a more severe impact on emerging economies, which already have high levels of private and public debt. It says that the development prospects in the fractured world. The report also warned of a potential debt crisis in the developing world. The current course of action is hurting vulnerable people everywhere, especially in developing countries. We must change course. So, as the Federal Reserve tightens rates, tries to fight inflation in the U.S., and it is now because inflation numbers have come out for this month that when they meet in November, I think it's first week in November that the Fed will meet, they're expecting another 0.5 point to 0.75 point interest rate, again, higher. And the UN is saying, you got to stop, you got to turn this ship around, you got to stop raising rates because it's impacting and it's hurting lesser wealthy countries. And so you've got this pressure that's going on. So what happens? If the Fed stops and pivots, then we could enter a time of hyperinflation and collapse of global currencies. So here's the rock and the hard place that the global financial system is in, led by the U.S. Federal Reserve, because it's the largest central bank in the world, and so much of the bond market and what happens in the U.S. affects so much of the world. So option one, keep raising rates to curb inflation, causing a severe recession depression around the world as everyone has too much debt to afford rising rates and less dollars in the system. So inflation is caused by too much money in the system, too much money printing, too much stimulus. Now you try to take it back. You try to remove cash from the system. You try to make it harder for people to go and get that easy money, go and borrow, more money. You make it more painful by raising interest rates to slow this easy money monetary system. The higher that the rates go, the more pressure it puts on the debt that people already currently have and countries have, and the higher possibility of default. But so you instead of increasing the supply, instead of creating more supply by increasing manufacturing and all that kind of stuff and getting the economy to actually produce something, instead you stop people from being able to afford stuff. You stop being able that they start buying the extra stuff that they are. Maybe they eat out less. Maybe they go to the movies less or sporting events less. Maybe they stop buying luxury items less, and they slowly narrow their budget to just the essentials, and you basically create demand destruction. You prevent people from being able to afford things. Instead of creating more supply and making things cheaper, you let this supply chain tighten, and you prevent people from purchasing things. And so that can be totally devastating to an economy. Excuse me. But what they could do is they could pivot. They could say, okay, even though inflation is still rising, these interest rates are hurting countries around the world, so we're going to stop raising rates. Now, this doesn't mean that they decrease rates. They could just slow it down, then they could stop. But eventually, they're going to bring rates down. They're going to try and stimulate the economy. This is the pivot. And they're going to stop fighting inflation. If inflation isn't low enough, if they don't get it under control with these raising rates, let's say they continue to raise rates, inflation is still high, and then they start reducing rates, but inflation is still high, then you could lose all control of the currency, end up in hyperinflation, and completely destroy the currency. And so that's the problem of that they're facing right now. And so it's a situation where we have a problem of things that are happening, and the severity of the global financial crisis. And so we're told the script in advance. In Revelation 6, verse 5 and 6, the Bible tells us that one of the first events that begins the countdown to the Lord's return is a global financial collapse, hyperinflation, and food scarcity. Jesus in Matthew 24:7 also talks about famines. So in Revelation 6 it says, when the Lamb broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come. I looked up and saw a black horse, and its rider was holding a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard the voice from among the four living beings say, a loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay, and don't waste the olive oil and the wine. A lot of people wonder a few things. Why now? Why 2023? Why is 2023 going to be the year? Since empires have collapsed and nations have collapsed and currencies have collapsed all before. It's everything coming together. It's all of these events, domino, falling after domino, falling after domino. And it's like, sure, we've had wars, we've had depressions, we've had energy crises, we've had housing bubbles, but they've all been at different points in time. They haven't affected the whole world all at once. Like, inflation is all over the world. Currencies are failing all over the world. Nations are looking at going to war, whether it be North Korea and South Korea, or even Japan, with North Korea firing missiles over Japan. Like, who knows what's going to happen with that? Or Russia and Ukraine, or China and Taiwan, or US and China, or NATO and Russia, or Iran and Israel. Like, there are nations all over the world. Doesn't matter if it's Western nations or Eastern Europe or Middle East, or whatever region. You've got tensions of major conflict, and so we're having all of these things come together, and that's what the Bible talks about. There are many reasons for why now, from a biblical standpoint. The Jews are returning to the promised land. The failure of the church. How many times are we talking about doctrines, and Christians can't even agree on what salvation is, how to be saved. Can you lose your salvation? Can you if you live in sin, which we are all of the flesh, we all still sin. That is the grace of God, that we come to Him and ask for forgiveness. But like, people are like, Christians, teach that you can lose your salvation. Like, we throw this term lukewarm around for Christians all over. And look, I know that in my previous videos I've been harsh on Christians, and it's because it's our arrogance and our ignorance. We are the most biblically illiterate generation, and yet we have access to apps of the Bible, but we don't understand the Lord's timing. We don't understand these things. We're not seeing how close. We can't put two and two together. The U.S. and Western nations want to divide Israel and have a two-state solution. Well, then leaders get put in who make terrible financial decisions and terrible decisions and policies for their countries, and their countries start falling apart. And we can't say, oh, maybe it's because the leaders of the country want to divide Israel that God is allowing these nations to collapse. We can't put two and two together to say, okay, well, the U.S. is collapsing. It's the largest economy in the world. It's struggling. It's fallen apart. And what's the next nation that could take its place? Well, it's Communist China. And Communist China, should they go to war with United States, outnumber by military size the United States, like, hands down. So it's just like, I don't know if we think that we can't see these things tied together. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a failure. We're not talking about this. We're not preparing people and preparing Christians to hold on to their faith. We're talking about transgender issues and all these kinds of things, where it's like, your nation is falling apart. The church is blind to its mission. And it's just like, I don't know, it just blows my mind how we're not preparing Christians to say, look, I don't know how long the Lord will tarry. I thought we would already have been raptured. I've been wrong at different times. That's why I've stopped trying to predict when the Lord's going to call us home. What I try to focus on is to say, He said these things are going to happen. We will see these seals be broken. If we're going to be here, that's His decision. If we're here, we're here. We watch, we wait, but it's just to see these things come together, and we might be here. I don't know. I hope we're taken home today, but we might not be. And so we wait, and we prepare, and we get ready for these times that are coming. But the church is not telling its people how many people are going to suffer through as these seals are broken, if we're still here, suffer through some terrible times and lose their faith. Watch America fall and watch China rise, and be like, where's God in all of this? I thought America was this Christian country. The only nation that God has promised to protect is Israel. He's the God of Israel. He's not the God of America. And we don't seem to get this. And so, we've got interconnectivity of the global financial system and extreme debt levels like we've never seen before. And we have two major ideologies in the world. The West wants to globalize, and China wants to be the top dog. That's just, and and Russia and China want to reunify what they see as their former glory empires, and stop Western globalization. But there's one big reason why I think God will intervene now and allow these things to collapse. And it's called central bank digital currencies. And I'm going to get into that later. But we're going to cover just to give you an update. So previously we talked about how Israeli rabbis say he's already holding meetings with Messiah. We talked about this when I first covered the first seal in 2021. We talked about this rabbi here talking about the Messiah's arrival according to Kabbalah. So we know that the Jewish rabbis are looking for the Messiah. Here, this particular rabbi talks about that between Yom Kippur 2022 to 2023, the Messiah will make his second appearance. But here, I want to kind of dissect this a little bit. And this is why I talked about the Jubilee and the Shemitah year. So it says here that this rabbi believes that in the year of Jubilee. Now, he has assumed that last year was the year of Jubilee, okay? But in a recent, and so I just want you to keep that in mind, that he thinks that on Yom Kippur 2021 would be the year of Jubilee, okay, from 2021 to 2022. So the end of revealing at the end of the Jubilee, Messiah will emerge again in Yom Kippur 2022. Okay, so this rabbi thinks that the year of Jubilee is 21 to 22. In this recent reenactment, so this article here, sorry, I should have started at the beginning, was October 12th of this year, so just a few days ago. Reenactment of the water libation held to prepare for the third temple. So they had this big gathering in Jerusalem on and the ceremony was reenacted and it has ties to the third temple and so you can kind of read this, but here I want to just point this out. So it says here that the verse talks about like their teaching. So the verse comes in context of the prophecy about God bringing the nation of Israel back from exile among the nations. Amid descriptions of the days preceding the Messiah, the Talmud says, as it is written in that day I will raise up a tabernacle of David that is fallen, our rabbis taught, in the 7-year cycle, at the end of which the son of David will come in the first year. This verse will be fulfilled. On Rosh Hashanah 2 weeks ago, the Shemitah sabbatical year ended. That 7th year ended. The Talmud is stating explicitly that the Messiah will come in the first year after the Shemitah. It should be noted that the Talmud describes the days before the Messiah. So they're saying that they believe that their Messiah is going to appear in the first year after the 7th cycle, in the first year of the next 7th cycle. And so a lot of Christians are looking at this and saying, okay, now that previous in 21 to 2022, we just passed the Shemitah year. Is this now the next cycle of 7? Talking about the 7-year Jacob's trouble having started right now. And I'm saying no. I'm saying that I believe this year is the Jubilee year. This year is the transition. This is the in between the previous 7-year cycle, where the Shemitah year ended in 21-22 just a few weeks ago. But now we're entering the Jubilee year, and then come next feast holidays, we're going to start the first year, and that is when this false Messiah will be put in place. That's when they will believe that the Messianic age will begin. And this year, these next 12 months are going to be these especially difficult times that will come before the Messiah, quote unquote, this false Messiah, the Antichrist, rises to prominence. And so when Seal 1, I believe that sometime soon the Jewish people are going to declare or reveal, or somehow something is going to happen where whoever this false Messiah that they've been meeting, that they believe is the Messiah, is going to reveal themselves. I do not believe he's going to hold any power. He's just going to simply have the title of the Jewish Messiah. He's going to be anointed as the Messiah. that is what I think the first seal is going to be. I don't think any 7-year agreement is going to happen. I don't think the 7 years will have begun at that point. I think it's simply that seal 1, this false Messiah, is sent out to begin his gathering of power, to start having influence, to start, so that come the next feast holidays next year in 2023, after the Gog-Magog war, he is now proclaimed as the ambassador of God, and that he's going to lead Israel into the Messianic age. It's going to be a time of peace, and he will lead the one world government for Jews and Gentiles. And so that's what I believe, that over the next year, once he's announced or once he's revealed that this is who it is, and I don't know if that's going to be privately, I don't know if it's going to be publicly, but when that first seal is broken, I believe he's not going to have any power, and he just begins to gain his power, so that come the end of the Gog-Magog war, he is then put in a high position of the world leader and will lead Israel among the nations. And the Jewish people believe they've entered the Messianic age. And so I believe that we have not started the first year of this next set of 7. I think we're in the Jubilee year this year, which is what this previous rabbi was talking about. That at the end of beginning of the Jubilee year, this Messiah would reveal himself, then he would disappear over that year, and come the end of the Jubilee year, this Messiah would emerge again on Yom Kippur. So just change the year from 2022 to 2023, and that he says somewhere between Yom Kippur 2022 and 2022, the Messiah will make his second appearance. I think that this year, this false Messiah will make his first and second appearance. First he'll be revealed, then he'll go away or disappear, whatever, start gaining power and influence, so that at the end of the Gog-Magog war, and that's why I think this year is the transition year of all these things, so that the seals are broken. And what are the points of the seals? The point of the seals, when you look at them, is they're all human decisions. The human decision for the Jewish people to declare this Messiah, and not that Jesus is their Messiah. Seal number 2, nations go to war. So whether it be China invading Taiwan, whether it be North Korea, some other nation, whether it be Japan or South Korea, whatever North Korea is doing, their missile testing and firing missiles and all that kind of stuff, whether it be Iran and their proxies attacking Israel, whether it be Russia and Ukraine, which I believe Russia in the next few weeks are going to have a major offensive against Ukraine. All these nations, I believe that's seal number 2. Then seal number 3 is the collapse of the global economy due to hyperinflation, these pivots that I think the central banks are going to do. And we're going to see where food, buying a loaf of bread, prices start to get so crazy that it's going to cost a day's wages. And we're starting to see that in some developing countries, some poorer countries already. So and I think that'll become systemic. More and more nations are going to see those types of price increases around food. And then seal number 4 is the escalation of seal 2 and seal 3, where these nations go to war. It expands to a global war where 2 billion people, 1/4 of the earth, is engaged in global war, where instead of these nations, the poor nations, having inflation and food problems and food scarcity, it becomes exacerbated, and it becomes a global thing where food all around the world is so expensive. Currencies all over the world, whether you're in a developed country or a developing country, currencies have collapsed. And that's seal number 4. Seal number 5, I believe that the West is going to lose World War III and this global war, and the currency is going to collapse. And I believe that the China, Russia, Iran, whatever those nations, I believe they're going to overtake the West. They're going to destroy the West and Western civilization. And then they're going to bring, because when you've got Iran, when you've got North Korea, when you've got nations, like that, and you've got China, who are not favorable to Christians, then I believe that they're going to take their that treatment, that the massacring of Christians, and they're going to bring it global. And I believe that's seal number 5. And then seal number 6 is the Gog-Magog war, where those nations come against Israel, and then God gives Israel the victory, wipes out all those nations, so that then the time of the Gentile reign, the time of the Gentile nations' reign on earth comes to an end, where the Western civilization has been destroyed, and then those nations are destroyed by God for coming against Israel, and Israel will become the new superpower. And then under this false Messiah, Antichrist, this false Messianic age will take place for the first 3.5 years, and we'll see, the world will see peace. They'll have that peace agreement, the covenant with many, and it'll be this false peace. And what it will be under the law, under it'll be under the what's it called, Mosaic law. Anyway, it's going to be under the law instead of under Jesus. That salvation for right relationship with God is going to be offered through following the law, following the Torah, or whatever their traditions are, and not salvation through Jesus. That's why he is the Antichrist. It's not only that he's going to be anointed in place of Christ as the Messiah, it's that the salvation that he is going to offer the world is not through the shed blood of Christ and the sacrifice that he made, but it's going to be through the law and through good works and those types of things. And that's his reign. That is going to be how he rules, is under this law. And we see that in Judaism and their beliefs about what the Messiah is going to do, and or what they believe the Messiah is going to do. And so, and then at the 3.5 year mark, this Antichrist is going to suffer a head wound. He's going to survive. He's going to be indwelt by Satan, who has been kicked out of heaven with his angels onto earth, and he becomes the beast, and then all hell breaks loose on earth. And the mark is issued and all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of the timeline that I see. That's a timeline that I continue to reiterate, that the 7 years is not yet, that there will be a public, after all the war, after all the devastation, then the covenant will with many. Because a lot of people believe that and here we're gonna, let me just, because I did talk about this. All right. We're gonna come back to the CBDC. Okay. I've talked about this. Okay. Many Christians believe and think that the 7 years begins at seal 1 of Revelation 6. It does not. Daniel 9:27 says the final 7 years begins with a covenant or treaty with many. This would be a terrible treaty in seal 1 unless it was for war and not peace. Unless the treaty is 7 years of war. Well then, okay, seal 1 would begin the 7 years, but it's not. It's going to be for peace. That wouldn't make any sense, because seal 2 and seal 4 are about massive war on earth, nations going to war, global war, World War III, whatever you want to call it, in seals 2 and 4. So when does the 7 years begin? Well, it would make sense to come after the time of war, after the time of chaos. So we see the seals break, we see the Gog-Magog war happen, then the treaty between Israel and the nations signed for 7 years. That is what I understand. So Revelation 11 is where I think the 7 years starts, not Revelation 6. First, to me, there's no such thing as a 7 year tribulation. It's a false construct. There is a 7 year period, and there is a great tribulation. The 7 year period, Daniel 9:27, the final 70th week, And why is it Jacob's trouble? Because they're going to start under the law. They're going to follow a leader who is a false Messiah. They're going to be deceived. It doesn't have to be that the world is burning in flames and in chaos and war and stuff. It's that they're under, like Paul talks about, and I think it's in Romans 5 or maybe it's Romans 7, correct me if I'm wrong, and he talks about how the law is not freeing, it's imprisonment. So yes, even though there might be peace in the world and under this false antichrist, and they're going to think this is the messianic age, that their enemies have been defeated, their nation is now prosperous, it's now the superpower of the world, but they're under the law, they're imprisoned, it's under a dictatorship. And then at the 3.5 year period, it gets even worse, because now this false Messiah suffers the head wound, is embodied by Satan, becomes the beast, and now the beast actively tries to wipe the Jewish people off the face of the earth, and they have to flee to the wilderness, and all hell breaks loose on the world. So to me, that is the great tribulation that Jesus talks about, that when he commits the abomination in the temple at the 3.5 year mark in defiance of God, and then goes after God's people, the Jewish people, and declares war on the world for the final 3.5 years until Jesus returns. That is the great tribulation. So we see the 7 years are broken up into two parts, like in Daniel, where it's 3.5 year periods. And we see this with Revelation 11 verse 3. We have two witnesses who preach for 1260 days. If you follow Daniel 9, we know that the 69 weeks were in 360-day Jewish years, Hebrew years. So when you take the 360-day Hebrew year, 1260 days is exactly 3.5 years. Then Revelation 11:5 says that the two witnesses are invincible. People tried to kill them, but they get killed, and the witnesses survive for the full and are able to preach for the 1260 days. Revelation 11:7 says that the two witnesses preach for the 1260 days, and after their testimony, then the beast will rise up and kill them. Revelation 13:1 shows us the beast rising at the 3.5 year point. The Antichrist is human for the first 3.5 years. He is their leader, he is their commander, but when he suffers the head wound and survives, he becomes embodied by Satan, becoming the beast at the midpoint of the 7 years. He will then kill the two witnesses, and he will be given authority to reign for 42 months or 3.5 years. 3.5 years for the two witnesses to preach, then they are killed by the beast who rises, and he is given authority by Satan to reign over the earth for 42 months, which is 3.5 years, equals 7 years, beginning Revelation 11, not Revelation 6, as some believe. So here is what the time frame I think we'll look at. In Rosh Hashanah 2021 to 2022, we had a Shemitah year, the last year of the 7 years. Rosh Hashanah 2022, which is September 25th to 27th of 2022, I believe is not the first year of the next cycle of 7, but the 50th year of Jubilee, the intermediate year that happens once every 50 years. I think in this year, we're going to see seal 1, where the false Jewish Messiah is revealed. Doesn't have any power, doesn't become the world leader. He's just simply anointed as the Messiah of the Jews has come. Seal 2, nations like China and Taiwan go to war. Russia increases its war in Ukraine. Iran and Israel go to war. Peace is removed from the earth. Seal 3, global economic collapse due to hyperinflation, destruction of currencies where food is unaffordable. Seal 4, Seal 2, is an escalation of Seal 2, where war escalates. Seal 3 escalates, where it becomes global, and it's World War III. Global famine will sweep the earth, and untold die. I don't know why it says untold never die, but apologize for that mistake. Seal 5, martyrdom of Christians. I believe the West will lose this war to China-Russia alliance, and the atrocities that have been befalling Christians in those nations will now, who won't bow to these authoritarian regimes, will die all over the earth. Seal 6, Gog-Magog war. The remaining Gentile nations, China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, march on Israel. God destroys them, ending the reign of the Gentile nations and defending Israel. The whole world sees Israel. The God of Israel is alive. And in that moment, atheism, agnosticism, all these false religions and beliefs about God die in that moment, because now the whole world knows that the God of Israel, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is alive and well, and they worship him. This gives the Antichrist, this false Messiah, an opportunity to become the intermediary, the intermediary before God, between God and man, so to speak, where he can reside in Jerusalem, he can lead the world, he can, and under the name of being the ambassador of God, he could sign a 7-year peace treaty, and the 7 years will begin on the Feast of Tabernacles, and then in that high holy days. I'm not saying like it's going to be a particular day, but I believe that that's when, after the Gog and Magog war, I believe somewhere in that high holy days of 2023, and that begins the first year of the new 7-year cycle. And the false Messiah, aka the Antichrist, takes credit for the victory and establishes himself as the world leader. So that is how I see the next year going, between this holiday season and next. And as I talked about, if we continue what the 7 years, I believe the 7 years looks like, we've got the 7-year treaty facilitated by the Antichrist is signed right here. This is just a continuation from the last page. Feast of Tabernacles 2023 is the first year of the new 7 years. I believe the temple will be built basically right away within the first couple months. So probably by December, because I think that's what Hanukkah is the dedication of the temple. So I believe that from between the signing of the agreement for starting the 7 years, I believe that the third temple will be rebuilt, and they could probably dedicate it. If my holidays are correct, I believe that's what Hanukkah is. Could dedicate the third temple during that season. Then we'll have the two witnesses preach for 1260 days, or 3.5 years. We have a false messianic age of peace for 3.5 years. And the Antichrist suffers a head wound, survives, empowered by Satan, who has been kicked out of heaven in Revelation 12. And this Antichrist becomes the beast, Revelation 13, verses 1-5. Antichrist now becomes the beast, commits the abomination of the temple that has been existing, and these are the verses that talk about that abomination. Then you have the Great Tribulation for 42 months, 3.5 years before Jesus returns and destroys Israel's enemies. Here's what I want to talk about: the final battle of Armageddon. A lot of people just think this is once again the nations gathering and destroying Jesus. So they come up with their missiles and whatever, and they try to shoot Jesus out of the sky. I believe that Armageddon is basically the culmination of the entire kingdom of darkness. So you've got the Nephilim, you've got human hybrid creatures that you've got the fallen angels that have been stored up in hell till judgment. You've got them released. You've got things coming out of the abyss that have been released on the earth. You've got all these entities. You've got the angels kicked out of heaven in Revelation 12 with Satan to the earth. So you've got all this mixture of divine, demonic, satanic beings with human beings on the earth for this last 42 months, creating an army, building an army, whether they're using genetic manipulation, whatever they're using, they're going to create an army to destroy Jesus. It's not going to be human beings and the puny missiles. That happened in the wars before. I believe that Armageddon is that the kingdom of darkness comes against the land of Israel to destroy the land of Israel, knowing that Jesus will come to rescue Israel and is prepared to knock him out of the sky and claim the throne of the earth. And that's when Jesus completely wipes them out at the battle. So that's how I understand the Battle of Armageddon. It's not just human beings. It's going to be the culmination of the kingdom of darkness. So one of the things that I think that as I wrap this up, and I'm just going to give a couple references, but one of the things that I think, why now? What is happening behind the scenes? Of course, I think that the world leaders, including former President Trump, having a Middle East peace plan that divides Israel and divides Jerusalem, I think that was bad. I think Christians supporting that has caused judgment to come on America. And I think that's why when God removed Donald Trump and replaced it with the Biden administration, we've seen the collapse of America happen so rapidly. Again, this is not political. I believe that this has always been spiritual, that it has surrounded. America was blessed while the president endorsed and blessed Israel. But when you put a plan in place and you try to enact that plan, we see whatever the Abraham Accords that has existed between the nations has not required Israel to be divided. They've established trade agreements with the United Emirates. They have better relations with the Saudis. There's nations in the Middle East that there was headway made. It didn't require the division of Israel. But the problem is that former President Trump and his administration wanted to divide Israel and Jerusalem for peace in the Middle East, and that was a false peace, because the Lord, and it says that that's his land. In Leviticus 25 it says it's his land. In 2 Chronicles 6:5-6, God says that Jerusalem is his city with his name on it. And in Joel 3:1-2, he says he's going to bring the nations into judgment for scattering his people and dividing his land. Don't touch his land. Like that's clear. It's not the Jewish people. He is let them be in the land. That is a gift. He owned that land. That was his land before there were Jewish people on the earth. That and he has allowed them to live there. And at times he has exiled them from the land because of their disobedience. But it's always been his land. And we are not to come in and unilaterally decide to divide his land and divide his city. And that was what the plan was. So former President Trump was removed. We now have the Biden administration. We see that this is now the judgment on America. And so all these things are falling into place. But what I think is going to, why I think that the time of the Gentiles is at its end, why I think the Lord is going to allow this epic collapse to happen, is because of what we call a central bank digital currency. Okay, let's go back here. All right, is to prevent this from ever coming into full fruition. What is a central bank digital currency? Well, I've heard one economist that I follow, I call it a tyrant's wet dream. And we're going to watch a couple of videos, just to give you an idea. And we have a path to a CBDC or digital currency. And so we're just going to take a look at that. So, pardon me. So here we have American Presidency Project. We have right here from President Biden, March 9th of 2022. He signed an executive order ensuring responsible development of digital assets. So basically it talks about advances in digital and distributed ledger technology for financial services led to dramatic growth in the markets for digital assets. A profound implication for the protection of consumers, investors, and businesses, including data privacy and security, financial stability, systemic risk, crime, national security, the ability to exercise human rights, financial inclusion and equity, and energy demand and climate change. In November 2021, a non-state issued digital assets reached a combined market capitalization of $3 trillion, upon approximately $14 billion in early November 2016. Monetary authorities globally are exploring, and in some cases introducing, central bank digital currencies. I can't say whether the United States but nations are definitely looking at this. China has already, when it held the Beijing Olympics, tried to do a small rollout of a central bank digital currency. So here another Fed now to launch by mid-2023, Fed officials say. So the infrastructure that they're looking at for the distribution of this central bank digital currency, should they decide to implement a central bank digital currency, could be through the FedNow infrastructure. And so when it talks about here, the Fed has also been mulling the possibility of a CBC as another innovation that could make the U.S. payment system more efficient and competitive with such digital currencies emerging in other countries. She suggests that FedNow may bring some of the expected benefits of such a digital dollar even sooner. My expectation is that the Fed now addresses the issues that some have raised about the need for a CBDC, she said. As part of the Fed's assessment of a need for a CBDC, it solicited comments from the public, received 2,000 comments, and they'll be reviewing them and publish a summary of them. You can sell this, and that's the thing. So I'll give you two references right away, but you can sell this to people and make it sound fantastic, but it is going to be dangerous. Here's a video. I'm just going to leave it. It's by Redacted. Here, you just take the information, look it up, watch it. It talks about that in the coming weeks, Colonel McGregor of the United States military believes that in the next 3 weeks from this date, Putin is amassing biggest force yet to take some major parts of Ukraine, and that he's actually up until now issued restraint. And so it's whether you agree with it or not. I encourage you to watch this video, as it definitely says that they believe that Russia is going to make an offensive in the next couple of weeks on Ukraine, and I think that it's going to prompt a response from NATO, and I think this thing could get out of hand pretty quickly.
Everybody can see what is going on with our neighbors up north right now, despite the media's attempt at distracting people from it. And even though many hoped that elected officials would come to their senses about tyranny, instead they voted in favor of what could turn out to be the beginning of their end. Because systems cannot support the weight of tyranny. And everyone who can is right now attempting to get their wealth out. And that is the key. Right now, some of the wealth still has a chance to escape, because today, complete financial repression is not possible. But all of that changes with a central bank digital currency, a CBDC. So in this video, I'm going to explain very simply exactly what a central bank digital currency is, why governments so desperately want it, and every way that it is very different from the system we have today, terrifyingly different, because a CBDC grants totalitarian control to anybody who wields it. And as the Rothschilds said, let me control a nation's money, and I do not care who writes the laws. Ready? Let's dive in. Brief history. Banks started off as gold vaults. You stored your gold with the bank, and you could go get your gold with the receipt, or you could use the receipt itself as money. That works great until the bank commits fraud and loans out your gold to somebody else. You go and try and get your gold. Guess what? It's no longer there. Bank run occurs. Bank collapses. This should have been outlawed. Instead, it was nationalized with the invention of the central bank. In order to prevent a local bank from collapsing when it commits fraud, might as well create a bank of the banks, a bank account where banks can store some gold so that the bank isn't susceptible to a bank run. If they get a bank run because of fraud and lending out the gold that was your gold, they can just go and get some extra gold from the central bank. But you can't eliminate risk, you can only transfer it. And instead of this risk that was isolated to individual banks, now it had been transferred to the entire banking system. Fast forward a couple hundred years, it had been centralized even more, and the Federal Reserve was the central bank of the entire world. And just as had always happened throughout history, more receipts were issued, more claims on the gold was issued, then there was gold to back it up, and the rest of the world went and started a bank run on the United States, the Federal Reserve, and said, "Give us our gold that you promised us." And in 1971, Nixon said, "Nah, we're going to keep it." Now we live under a fiat currency system where governments can create as much currency as they want with no restraints on anything physical like gold. However, the banking system is built on hundreds of years of legacy systems and systems that are in place that were built on real restraints, as if the currency is actually backed up by something, as if banks actually need reserves, as if banks won't get a bailout from the money printer next time they need it. Your money is held digitally on a bank's balance sheet as if there's something actually there, as if it is more than just ones and zeros on a computer, as if they take your actual money and when somebody needs a loan, they lend it out. Newsflash, they don't. Banks lend money into existence. Every loan they make is money that did not exist before. This system is bad. This system is fragile. This system accelerates the concentration of wealth. It transfers wealth from the savers to the borrowers. And as bad as a system as this is, a central bank digital currency is exponentially worse. Not only is it worse, it is categorically different. And it is where we as people need to draw the line in the sand. Now, all lines are arbitrary in some sense, but if this one is crossed, most likely the only way out or back out of it is with complete systemic collapse. Remember how I said in the past you gave your gold to the bank and the bank had its own gold account with the central bank? It's the same today, although not with gold. You have an account with your bank and the bank still has an account with the central bank. A central bank digital currency, on the other hand, bypasses, nationalizes, restructures, and renders obsolete the current traditional banking system. Every individual and every business will have a wallet or an account directly with the central bank. Instead of opening up your Chase app or your Bank of America app, you'll open up your Fed Wallet app. Now, why is this so radically different and so intensely dangerous? Because the central bank maintains a legal monopoly on the creation and the destruction of a nation's currency. Now, that power is already the most dangerous power on earth today. Pair that with the ability to directly control every transaction and account of every individual and business, concentrated and isolated among a couple dozen unelected ivory tower bureaucrats. I cannot express enough how terrified everybody in the world should be of this. The entire purpose of a central bank digital currency is to give more control over how much money exists and exactly where that money exists. This money is programmable to allow a level of fine-tuning and scalpel-like economic policymaking at a degree never before seen. Right now, the central bank has to rely on bank lending and government deficit spending in order to insert new dollars into the economy. They have very little control over where those dollars end up. It's a sledgehammer approach. A central bank digital currency allows them to control that down to the penny. They could hypothetically give everybody a stimulus check that expires in 1 month in order to boost spending this month and hold off a recession. They could get everyone a food bonus, money that can only be spent at a grocery store who also has a wallet open with the Fed. They could hypothetically limit how many dollars you spend at a gas station during a specific time frame like a month if gas is getting too expensive or if gas supplies are running low. They could overnight shut off any person's ability to make any transactions whatsoever if you were deemed a criminal or dangerous or a terrorist. They could deposit dollars in your account that could only be spent on stocks if the stock market was crashing. They could prevent transactions like buying specific stocks if that stock looks to them like it's in a bubble. Right now, our neighbors up north are seeing their banks turn into the muscle for the state. The state is relying on brother versus brother, private business versus citizens. And right now, it seems pretty effective. Now imagine if a couple dozen unelected ivory tower bureaucrats can do all of this with a few strokes of the keyboard. No international wires, no usage of an ATM, no more approved business licenses without an account at the Fed, no more buying from any businesses unless you use your CBDC. And once this starts, you can imagine now how difficult it is to get out of this, to undo this, to backpedal and move out. You won't be able to use your CBDC to buy any gold. You won't be able to use any to buy Bitcoin. You won't be able to transfer any of your wealth out to make an investment in a different country in order to purchase citizenship by investment. You won't be able to rely on it in times of crisis to buy an airplane ticket out of the country, or at least to specific countries. All in the name of economic stability. All in the name of preventing money laundering. All in the name of national security. All of this in reality accomplishing the death of democracy and the fatality of freedom. A central bank digital currency is where I draw the line, because anybody who crosses it may not be able to cross it back.
So I know we basically watched the whole video there, but I definitely encourage you to follow Joe and Heresy Financial. It's a great channel. And there's other ones that I can show where backs up. You can hear it from even some organizations that 3-letter acronym organizations that I won't mention on here, but the backs this up, that this will be programmable, this will be central bank controlled, but it'll be to prevent fluctuations in the market. It'll be able to prevent recessions and depressions, be able to prevent all these things. And so that's why I think that, because it'll basically take away humanity's freedom, I think God is going to step in and allow these things to fall apart. And yes, one day humanity will choose to follow a leader who will have this kind of power, and they will choose it. The Bible says that they will choose to follow and worship the Antichrist, the beast, knowing he's of Satan. It says that in Revelation 13. I think that God will allow us to choose things, but this would not be a choice. This would be a system that would be implemented, and it would be forced across the world. And I think that that's why, to prevent these things from coming in next, that he's going to allow all of the mess that we've made start crashing down around us. But again, our hope is not in this world. Our hope is not in the next election or our leaders. It is in Christ alone. And let's look up and watch for his return. May the Lord bless you and keep you until he comes. Take care.